Last year, about a half a dozen of us folks from Delafield who are concerned about the influence of big money corporations and political action groups in our political processes circulated a petition to the city of Delafield to place a referendum on the November 8th ballot calling for a U.S. constitutional amendment allowing legislation restricting this influence. This referendum passed by a margin of 79% in the city of Delafield. It voted overwhelmingly Republican, so it had bipartisan support. 730 municipalities nationwide, including 105 in Wisconsin, have passed referenda like this by overwhelming margins. 18 states have called for a constitutional amendment to clarify that people means real people and money is not speech, so reasonable campaign limits can be put in place, but there has been no action yet on this in Wisconsin. The referendum asked both of you to support legislation, or all three of you to support legislation to advance this constitutional amendment. Will you support such legislation?
And Jerry's a regular. We have discussions about this often, so I appreciate you voicing your concern on it. And I will say that I think the biggest problem we have with money in politics right now is driven by McCain-Feingold. Their campaign finance reform closed some loopholes, but it opened up the big unknown. And I experienced this in one of my campaigns where I had a dark shadow group, we couldn't trace who it was, release about $100,000 worth of literature in the last 4 days of my election cycle, saying basically outright lies. So I understand the frustration because I felt it personally. The way that the campaign finance laws are established and the Supreme Court has ruled on this is they are constitutional the way they are, so it have to be changed, either change the Constitution or they would have to be changed in Washington. So what Jerry's referring to is Article 5 of the Constitution allows the state legislatures to draft amendments to the U.S. Constitution. It then has to be ratified by the states. But there's a movement out there right now to amend the U.S. Constitution and you need 34 states to pass a resolution through the legislature. And if that happens under Article 5 of the Constitution, Congress shall call a convention that drafting would begin on what that proposed amendment would look like. So that's some background on it. I do not support the campaign finance, the one you're talking to is specifically Citizens United. And that one I am uncomfortable with because I feel that it does limit speech. And money is a way that people can voice their opinion in this country. And I believe in reasonable limits in situations. And I think if you look at individual limits and corporate limits from a state perspective, we have those in place. The gap right now is the big unknown where you can create basically any organization you want and have people funnel money into it, and then they can spend it wherever they want. That's the loophole that I think bipartisan support exists to close that up. But that's not the only thing that Citizens United deals with. So at this point, I don't support moving forward with a resolution in the state because I'm not comfortable with the verbiage that they've talked about. So that's my perspective on it.
I agree with Chris, and I know that we've discussed this also. So rather than be redundant, I would say I agree with Chris on this situation, and some of this is a federal problem that we need to fix at the federal level.
Yeah, it is. Even Congressman Sensenbrenner, if you've been to his town halls, talks about McCain-Feingold is what created some of the monster we have right now. And we do agree on that piece of it.
So, yeah, my biggest concern is that I think any spending for political communication, for political purposes, there should be full disclosure of who's giving the money. And to me, that's the most significant thing that's missing right now. I don't necessarily agree with imposing limits on people. If you've got a bunch of money and you want to spend it on voicing your opinion about things, I think you should be entitled to do that. But then, as a member of the public who has to listen to your nonsense, I should know who you are. So,
that being said, we have had 105 communities passing referenda supporting my position, calling for the constitutional amendment. And you've expressed concerns about that and opposition to it. So that brings me to my second question. So since the 105 community referendum haven't generated action in Wisconsin, but a statewide referendum convince you that the people of Wisconsin want you to act. So I'm now asking you to support Assembly Resolution LRB 176 and Senate Resolution LRB 1138, which will place a referendum on the November 2018 ballot asking the people of Wisconsin throughout the state. Your Congress should propose an amendment to the Constitution stating that 1, only people, not corporations, unions, nonprofit organizations, or similar associations are endowed with constitutional rights. 2, money is not speech, and therefore limiting political contributions and spending is not equivalent to restricting political speech. Knowing that this resolution is dealing at the congressional level. Will you support putting this referendum on the November 2018 ballot? And will you accept the results of this referendum as the will of the people and act accordingly?
I do not support putting it on the ballot because I don't support the concept of what it stands for. That money is basically, I think that
Money is not speech.
money is not speech, and I don't support that at all. Absolutely.
You do.
So what
So
I've
if I
asked,
have more money than.
Actually, sir,
If I have
we have to
more money
respect
than
the
him,
speaker,
I have
so
more speech
we're gonna
than him?
deal with him. So if it would get put on through legislation, obviously, we would accept whatever the ballot says, because that
but you
is
do not support these particular bills,
correct.
Because you feel money is speech.
Sir, he's got the
which is
floor.
asking the people of the state of Wisconsin to give you their opinion. You don't care about the people's opinion.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
In this instance, I would not support it.